When was the last time someone pressed your hot button? Yeah, you had a conversation with someone and you felt triggered. Your blood started to boil and you wanted to jump and squeeze the person's neck, which I hope you didn't. We all get triggered sometimes, don't we? And when we do, we react emotionally, and that can have disastrous consequences. Because we often say things that we later on regret, or we say things that damage the relationship. Now, when that happens with a stranger, oh well, but if it happens with someone that is very close to you, someone you share an office with, someone who is on your team and you're in charge of them, or a family member, then it is a problem. So it is in our interest to learn how to manage ourselves in difficult situations, in difficult conversations, so that we can prevent these disasters from happening. Because, at the end, this can have a terrible impact on our career and on our life back home. I know that this is an issue because many of my clients, they always comment on all sorts of communication disasters in the office. So I thought, okay, I'm going to record a series of short videos to help you communicate a little bit more effectively. And this one is the first one. And in this first one, I want to address the hot buttons. If you want to manage yourself more effectively in difficult situations, you first need to understand how you get triggered. What are your hot buttons that when someone presses, you go wild? So I'm going to give you a few questions that you can ask yourself in order to figure out what your hot buttons are. Hot buttons. These can be something that someone does. For instance, you may have a team member who consistently turns up late at every single meeting, and so it becomes your trigger. Do you have any other triggers? Something that a person does, a specific type of behavior? Note it down. Other triggers. We can get triggered by something that a person says. Short remarks such as, "I knew this all along," or "You always do this." All these little subtle phrases, and they can also become major triggers. So, is your trigger something that someone does, or something that someone says? Or it can be how they say what they say. Maybe the person increases their voice and they start talking to you like that, and that's a trigger. Maybe they put on a very funny facial expression, these, or all kinds of facial expressions, fun expressions that people do. Or it could be maybe a gesture that the person does. This is a typical gesture that triggers others. Could be your trigger as well. So, what are your triggers? Think about what people do, think about what people say, and think about how they say it, because all these things can be triggers. And also, a specific person can be a trigger. This poor person, they don't even open their mouth and they just step into the room and you're triggered, yeah? So the first step to success is to identify your triggers, your hot buttons, because if you understand your triggers, your hot buttons, then you can catch yourself in the act. You understand, my button has been pressed, and you can then start doing something about it. You can change your response to the trigger, all right? But you first need to understand what these triggers are. So if you find it very difficult to respond to these questions like that spontaneously, you can try this. Over a period of 3 to 5 days, you observe yourself and you note down what triggered you with different people in different situations. You note it down. Okay, what was the trigger? What was that specific situation, or was it a specific person? Then you note down what was your reaction to the trigger, and then what was the consequence of that reaction. You know, maybe you said something harsh, or maybe you felt completely paralyzed, you didn't know what to do, or maybe you changed the topic. You wanted to absolutely avoid that conversation because you knew it was going to be difficult. So write down the trigger, then your reaction, and then the consequence of that reaction. Okay? And in my next video, we will look at the situations when you get triggered and what you can do in order to avoid the disastrous consequences. So I'll see you in my next video.